Welcome viewers, we are delighted to present one of the most unique bow builds on our channel, the Lightning Arrow Hierophant. Hierophant is a rather unusual choice for a bow character, but it works out surprisingly well. By combining the archer and totem archetype, you will have the best of the two worlds. Bows have a tendency to use ballistas to supplement their single target anyway, and this build is no exception. Thanks to the Hierophant Ascendancy and Mind over Matter keystone, you will redirect 40% of damage into your mana first. Then, we use the Mind of the Council and Arcane Cloak to gain massive amounts of damage from your mana, making it very cost-effective to scale that resource. Usually, such builds have a hard time getting enough mana regeneration to comfortably sustain using their skills and taking damage, but since you deal plenty of damage with your attacks, you can easily leech it back. You will also leech life and energy shield, making it much more effective than usual. We utilize the precise technique keystone and reworked voice of the storm amulet, which grants us lucky damage with non-critical strikes. And of course, since it's a projectile-based build, we use the Vengeant Cascade anointment, which easily doubles our damage output. We push the totems to the maximum, while still retaining the bow gameplay style. You will use the lightning arrow to clear 99% of the content and deploy powerful siege ballistas to deal with tougher enemies. It is a very safe build. You can easily reach over 4,000 combined life and energy shield, and almost half of the damage you take is split into mana. Spell suppression is nearly capped just by your passive tree, and permanent endurance charges grant some physical damage reduction. The clear speed with the lightning arrow is excellent, just what you would expect from a bow build. It also has great single target damage, as befits the totem build. You can have up to 6 ballistas that shoot whenever you do. The entry cost of this build is rather low. The modifier combinations you would want on your items are rather niche, and the mana archetype is usually undervalued, so you can get very lucrative deals on your gear pieces. There are only 2 unique items that are mandatory for this build, and they are both quite cheap. Those are Voice of the Storm and Mind of the Council. While they do not have any build-defining properties, without them, it would be nearly impossible to scale your damage properly. There are also a few unique items you can use for a long time before you get a rare item that surpasses them. Voice of the Storm is a very powerful amulet that grants you lucky damage, which means it will be rolled twice and choose the best outcome. It also grants you plenty of mana, lightning damage, and attributes. The Vengeant Cascade anointment is mandatory, as it simply doubles your damage. Mind of the Council helmet grants you lots of mana, additional protection against lightning damage, and tons of damage for your attacks. Finding a good enchant can be a bit tricky since it's unpopular helmet, but you can try to get a useful corruption instead. Those can give you additional anointment, attack speed, resistances, and some bonus mana. Blighted Spores grant you random aura if you are nearby, which is pretty useful during map clear, but not so much when fighting singular bosses. You can easily find ones with useful corruption such as additional attack speed or frenzy charge. Since you have no use for power charges, you can convert them into absorption charges instead by using the Graven's Secret Belt. This will grant you 48% of elemental damage recouped as energy shield. You can also get a corrupted implicit that increases your global energy shield or grants you elemental resistances. Cloak of Defiance is a good starting armor that grants you plenty of flat mana and mana regeneration, and saves you 1 passive skill point. Getting the correct socket colors for your setup might be a bit tricky though. It's recommended to use Watcher's Eye Jewel, and since you will be using only 1 aura, the choice is rather straightforward. Getting multiple modifiers for 1 aura is possible, although rather costly. Sublime Vision Jewel has essentially no downside for this build, and greatly boosts your damage and survivability. Enemies sapped by you deal significantly less damage. On your gear, you will want lots of life, mana, and accuracy rating. You will also want various sources of increased damage, since you barely have any on your passive tree, making them highly effective. Precise technique requires you to have more accuracy than maximum life, so you should control how much accuracy you have with each upgrade. Use a bow with very fast attack speed, so you can benefit from other sources of added damage such as the arcane cloak. You should prioritize the lightning damage, but cold is also useful to inflict chills. Other than that, look for a chance to deal double damage, accuracy rating, or even Shaper's modifier that grants more attack damage for socketed ballistas. On a quiver you want as many modifiers that increase your damage as possible. Thanks to the bow mastery you can also use the projectile speed modifiers. Attack speed, additional arrows, or accuracy rating is also welcome here. Try to avoid having additional pierce here. On a rare armor you can get lots of life, mana, and spell suppression chance. You can also craft a modifier to take part of the physical damage taken as elemental, or the increased effect of mind over matter keystone while focused. You will need plenty of life, mana, and movement speed on your boots. You should also try to get spell suppression chance and elemental resistances here. Pair of rare gloves should grant you the usual defensive modifiers such as life, mana, or spell suppression. Rage generation from Eldritch Implicit makes up for the loss of anointment, and you have room to get lacking resistances or accuracy rating. On a rare belt you can find a lot of life, mana, and resistance modifiers. It can also increase your damage and grant you an abyss socket if you use a Stygian Vice as a base. You can get lots of flat life, mana, and accuracy rating here. Other than that, you can get added damage for your attacks, a chance to gain phasing on kill, a chance to blind enemies you hit, or various elemental avoidances. Rare rings can give you lots of life and mana. Other than that, try to get some accuracy rating, resistance, or attribute modifiers. You can use the fertile catalysts to boost life and mana modifiers even further. On your jewels you can find missing resistances, attributes, and accuracy rating. They should also boost your life and mana or bow damage. On a large cluster jewel you can find an amazing combination of notables that grants you life leech, energy shield leech, and some additional mana and lightning penetration. On a projectile-focused cluster you can get an insane amount of damage. Having 2 such jewels would be great, but you are rather short on passive points to spend. Dying Sun is the only recommended unique flask, as it grants you 2 additional arrows for your bow attacks, which improves both your clear speed and single target thanks to the barrage support. With the magic flask, you want to boost your survivability and mobility. Pick Instant Life Flask with Bleeding Removal and Jade Flask for bonus evasion rating. You should also get a Quicksilver Flask with increased movement speed, and Silver Flask for the Onslaught effect, and possibly increased attack speed suffix. Lightning Arrow is your primary attack used to clear packs of monsters and trigger ballista attacks. It shoots an arrow that hits 3 nearby enemies and has increased effectiveness of shock. Support it with faster attacks, pierce, elemental damage with attacks, inspiration, and lightning penetration gems. Optionally, added lightning damage or Mirage Archer support gems can be used. Siege Ballista deploys a totem that shoots piercing projectiles. It has greatly reduced attack speed, but inherently adds up to 3 maximum summon totems. The attack speed gets further reduced by use of barrage support, but it is negligible when using focused ballista support as well, and the following setup will offer the highest possible damage. On top of the 2 mentioned gems, also link it to elemental damage with attacks, lightning penetration and elemental focus support gems. Sniper's Mark is the recommended curse for this build. It increases the damage of your projectile hits and makes them split toward nearby enemies. Split projectiles can hit the target again when they return to you. It should be linked with Mark on hit support, causing it to be triggered automatically. Wrath grants a lot of lightning damage for your attacks and gives access to useful unique Watcher's Eye Jewel modifiers. You want to reserve none of your mana for better arcane cloak effectiveness, so it's best to use Wrath as a blessing skill via Eternal Blessing support. For this build, you are also going to use 2 utility attacks that will be triggered automatically via Mana-Forged Arrows support. Those are Frenzy, which allows you to easily generate frenzy charges, and Ensnaring Arrow, which slows down enemies, and makes them take increased damage from your projectiles. Both attacks can be linked to Innervate support and will occasionally grant that buff. You can also use the Divergent Innervate, which will make it trigger more consistently. Arcane Cloak is another most important utility skills for this build. It consumes a large portion of your mana to grant you an absorbing shield and added lightning damage based on the amount of mana consumed. With high mana pool, the effect of this single skill is amazing, and it's best to improve it further via use of Enhance and Increased Duration support gems. You can also link this entire setup to Flame Dash, which is the recommended mobility skill used. For the Bandits quest, the only viable option is to kill all of them for 2 extra passive points. Neither of the rewards they offer fully benefit this particular build. For the Major God, we recommend taking the Soul of the Brine King. It's one of the few ways to increase your resistance against stuns, and also when upgraded, it grants very valuable freeze avoidance. When it comes to the Minor God, the choices are less relevant, but you can't be wrong, select in Soul of Ralakesh. Physical dots and bleeding can be deadly with low life pool and mediocre physical damage mitigation that Hierophant offers. The passive tree consists mainly of maximum life, maximum mana, bow damage, and spell suppression nodes. Most of them are located in the bottom right part of the skill tree, which requires you to travel all the way there before you can gain any beneficial bonuses to your damage, making this setup nearly impossible to level up with. It would be recommended to level up using a generic totem build, and simply respec later on when you have the essentials collected. Most notably, you want both new passives that add an additional arrow to your bow attacks, Multishot and Master Fletcher. If you have a bow and quiver with additional projectile speed, it's recommended to take the corresponding Bowmaster to have it apply to your damage as well. Another important stat utilized by this build is Leech. You are going to leech all 3 resources. Mana from Essence Sap, and Life and Energy Shield should be leeched from Cluster Jewels. With this in mind, having 10% of it applied instantly from Leech Mastery is heavily recommended. This build also uses 4 important keystone passives that include Mind Over Matter, Precise Technique, Magebane, and Point Blank. For the damage, it's best to allocate Watchtowers, Farsight, and Primeval Force. And if for some reason you would decide to sacrifice some of your defensive capabilities for more damage, other nearby passives that could boost your DPS are Avatar of the Hunt, Gladiator's Perseverance, and possibly some variants could include Mark the Prey. That's all for this guide. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If you enjoyed this video or the build itself, make sure to let us know. And see you in the next one.